Hello everyone, Sientir here with another Rambler for you, and we're going to actually go ahead and continue the 7 Deadly Sins series today, and this time it is Sloth. So sloth is one of those words that, again, like all of these, I need to kind of define what I'm talking about. Again, I've taken some pre-notes, and one of the things I think is really important is that we need to draw a distinction between laziness and the 7 Deadly Sin of sloth. I think that it can be very easy to kind of confuse these two, in part because legitimately sloth and laziness are synonyms, but when I'm talking about the 7 Deadly Sins of sloth, I'm talking about what causes laziness, or what can cause what laziness kind of manifests as. So like laziness is usually kind of seen as lying about, not doing anything, not accomplishing anything, not doing any work, that sort of thing, not doing what you're supposed to do. Sloth, I think, speaks to the heart of the motivation of where that can kind of come from. And I think that, as I've thought about it, sloth is a lack of motivation that comes from a belief that the things that you're doing, your efforts, what you're putting out, don't have any value. In many regards, sloth wants to feel value and appreciated, attributed to kind of like what it's doing. And I think when sloth feels like what it's doing is not meaningful or worthwhile, then it basically ignores those responsibilities. It pursues what it wants to do, the stuff that is intrinsically meaningful. This can kind of cause all sorts of issues. I've noticed in my own life that it's a lot easier for me to do stuff that I really want to do than stuff that I don't want to do. And I think that's partly this sort of issue. If I don't feel that the thing that I don't want to do has some sort of meaning or value, either because it's accomplishing one of my intrinsic goals or because there's a high enough extrinsic goal attached to it, then I have a really hard time wanting to do it. So just kind of observing in myself there, I do think that potentially there's a kind of a darker side to sloth. I mean, it's already a dark side as it were, but an even darker side that I think it can lead towards gluttony, because sloth often means that people don't feel like what they're doing is being valued, so that can lead to them feeling kind of worthless. If what they're doing doesn't feel like other people value, then why should they have value? Because we often attribute our value to what we do. That can kind of potentially lead to gluttony, to try to drown out that inner turmoil, or any other way to try to accomplish feelings of worthiness. So it can potentially lead to envy, wanting to be someone else, somebody that people value, and it can also lead to greed of wanting to try to have stuff that makes you feel like you're valuable. All of these can be pretty hard to overcome. Sloth can be kind of insidious though, and largely I think the best way to try to overcome sloth is not willpower, but changing the situation. Sometimes it's not possible, but trying to figure out how you can pursue things that you can actually be motivated to do, that you actually want to do, that allow you to be able to overcome those difficult moments. I think that's probably the best way to deal with sloth. This one's overall kind of straightforward, I think, once I kind of dig down into this kind of concept. So I think that's about all I really have to say on sloth. Again, I just think that it's why people don't do things is because they lack the motivation to, and they lack the motivation because it doesn't feel valuable or worthwhile. I just want to make one final observation on this sort of point to just make things a little bit clearer. This is not necessarily an intellectual feeling of value. This is an emotional feeling of value. It's really important to call that out because there's a lot of things where it's very easy to say, from an intellectual standpoint, I know that this is value. But knowing something in your head and knowing it in your heart are two very different things. And it's very important, I think, to make it clear that that matters a lot here. Motivation is usually more emotionally driven than intellectually driven. Our willpower only gets us so far, and it burns emotional reserves, or at least is my experience with it, is that having to put out an output of willpower burns my emotional reserves. So if for some reason my emotional reserves are low, it's a lot harder for me to expend willpower to be able to force myself to do something. Whereas if my willpower, or if my emotional reserves are a lot higher, then it's a lot easier. So there's a very important understanding here that we can't just will ourselves to be motivated to do things just because we're like, well, I know that this matters and is valuable to people. You have to actually feel it, I think. This is at least my thoughts on this particular topic. I thought it was important to kind of bring that up because it's very easy to kind of excuse this while saying, well, just be motivated then, just attribute value to it. Sometimes that can be really hard with stuff that blatantly just does not have much value. It can also be really hard if it feels like nobody is indicating that it has value. And no matter how much you might be able to try to talk yourself into thinking that it has value, if it does not get to your heart, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to make sure that I was expressing that because I feel like it can be very easy to kind of ignore the significant part of the emotional aspect of this. So with that, I'm not going to repeat myself indefinitely. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up here. Until next time, you can like me on Facebook at facebook.com/Sientir'sRamblers. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Sientir, and you can email me directly at sientir@gmail.com. Until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.